Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about people with disabilities and what healthcare workers should know about people with disabilities. So we have an amazing group with us here today. My name is Kayla Slavic, and I'll be our moderator. With us is also our expert, Ainsley Sims, and two guest speakers, Itzel Zavala and Catherine Pickrell. So we're super excited to hear from them today. For our agenda, we're going to be going over population description and vulnerabilities. Then we're going to talk with our expert Ainsley Sims about health issues and obstacles in an interview. Then we'll have our guest speakers present. So we'll go first talking about profiles and successes, and then Kat Pukrell is going to speak to us about actions and organizations. We will then conclude our webinar with a Q&A and a quiz. So what is a disability? The CDC defines this as any condition of the body or mind that makes it more difficult for the person with the condition to do certain activities and interact with the world around them. And then the WHO also has 3 dimensions of disability: impairment, activity limitation, and participation restrictions. So I know one of our guest speakers, Kat, sent out a poll to our audience to get a better idea of what you all know about the disabled community. So I'll turn the time over to Kat to discuss those results.
Thank you, Kayla. So like she said, from this poll, we found that of the 15 who responded, we have 60% who have a family member who's currently living with a disability. And these people developed their disability. We have 55.6% they were actually born with it. And then the other 44.4% that it was developed from an illness. And the other 3 questions that this quiz or this poll was able to find was that there are some misconceptions and some underestimation by us of how often US adults are affected by disabilities. So it's actually 1 in 4 adults are affected by disabilities. So anyways, it just was a great indicator to see how we're doing and where we can go from now, but we'll learn some great information next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kat. And as she mentioned some of those statistics, here's a few more for us to think about. As she said, 1 in 4 US adults struggle with a disability of some kind. People with disabilities are at a much higher risk of a comorbidity such as obesity or heart disease. And also 44.6% of Utahns with disabilities make less than $25,000 a year. So some very interesting things for healthcare providers to keep in mind when they're treating disabled patients. Some other vulnerabilities: 1 in 4 adults with disabilities do not have a usual healthcare provider. 1 in 5 have an unmet healthcare need because of cost in the past year. 1 in 4 did not have a routine checkup in the past year. And we'll talk a little bit more about these as we meet with our panel. So we're going to start with our expert, Ainsley Sims. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. I see you have a slide here a little bit about health issues and health disparities. Would you like talking to us a little bit about that?
Yes, I would love that. So there are a lot of health issues and health disparities that those with disabilities can face. While there are like mental disabilities and physical disabilities, both can lead to the issue of mental health. And so those with disabilities face a higher level of psychological distress, and overall they have poorer mental health. And so mental health is kind of in a harsh cycle along with disabilities, because mental health can be a cause and an effect of disabilities. And so oftentimes those with disabilities have activity limitations and participation restrictions. And so that can cause like social isolation, and that can lead to a lot of depression and anxiety. And so adults with disabilities report frequent mental distress almost 5 times as much as adults without disabilities. And so that is a staggering statistic. And it is really unfortunate to see such great risk those with disabilities have for depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a slide on this as well, but what do you think are some obstacles or barriers to the disabled community?
Well, when it comes to physical barriers, when you go to like a doctor's checkup, there are a lot of basic vital equipment that they use, like exam tables, x-ray equipment, weight tables, exam chairs. And those are all really, really difficult things for people that have physical disabilities because they're not really accessible. And so that is a huge obstacle. And kind of because of that, that leads to adults with disabilities being more likely to skip or delay healthcare just because of cost and obstacles like that. And so actually doctors discriminate against those with disabilities a lot. And a study reported that only 56% of physicians welcomed patients with disabilities. And so I read that doctors will say things like, oh, your insurance doesn't cover this, or, oh, you actually need specialized care, just because they don't want to go the extra mile. There's a lot of stigmas that go against those with disabilities, like they're helpless, that they don't know how to make decisions for themselves, and other things like that, which can make it really difficult in a healthcare setting.
That's so sad. I know you also included a video with your presentation. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the video before we watch it?
Yeah, absolutely. This video just kind of It's a call to action for disability inclusion. It shows kind of how the world could be changed if we just included and made those with disabilities were part of the population instead of stereotypes.
Okay, wonderful. Let's watch this video really quick and then say our final farewell to Ainsley. Thank you so much.
A series of interviewees with a wide range of different disabilities, both visible and invisible.
Disability is a normal, positive part of human diversity.
Disability is diverse, and people with disabilities have other important identities.
Disabled people come from different cultures.
These parts of our lives also affect what we are able to do and how people treat us.
Nothing about us without us.
We want to have a say in everything that affects us.
We are people with disabilities building power and inclusive social justice movements.
Funders should serve people with diverse disabilities.
We ask for disability access because when we evolve our institutions to be fully inclusive, we can build a world where all are free.
True inclusion
is revolutionary.
Where are you in your journey to inclusion?
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Ainsley, for sharing that video with us. If there's one thing that you would like our audience to take away from our discussion today on the disabled community, what would it be?
I just love in that video that it said that true inclusion is revolutionary. And I really think that that is a thing. Just, I feel like a lot of disabled people may feel like they are oppressed. And so if we can just, as a community, get together and help them not feel that way and truly include them and help them feel more confident in themselves, then it can be revolutionary and life-changing.
Okay, awesome. Thank you again so much for taking the time to meet with us today, Ainsley. We're going to turn the time over now to
A series of interviewees.
To our first guest speaker, Itzel Zavala, who's going to talk to us about a profile of a disabled individual and also some success stories. So go ahead, Itzel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this is Sarah, who's living with dyslexia, and this is an invisible disability. Dyslexia is a learning disability in reading, and so Sarah is 23 years old, and when she first found out that she has dyslexia, it was in first grade because she couldn't read as well as the other kids. She mixed up letters like B and D and M and W, and it was just harder for her to read and write compared to her other classmates. Sarah has to work harder to be able to read and write, especially when it comes to school. So that's a really big challenge for her. And next, with my success. So there are many success stories from people, and success is different for everyone. And having a disability is not an obstacle for success. This is Helen Keller and Stephen Hawking, and Helen Keller was the first deaf blind person to earn a bachelor's of arts, and Stephen Hawking is another perfect example of someone who is disabled and successful. He is best known for his discovery that black holes emit radiation that can be detected by special instrumentation. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, super interesting stories, Itzel. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. We'll now turn the time over to our second guest speaker, Kat Pickrell, who's going to talk to us about actions and organizations.
Okay, thanks, Kayla. So to begin, just on some actions, we've already addressed some issues that the disabled community has faced within healthcare. But what healthcare providers can do, is to speak directly to the patient and not a companion who may be in the room with them, to help these people feel like they are receiving the care that they're in there for. And also to avoid making assumptions. Don't make an assumption of what someone can or cannot do. Also ask how to best communicate, and provide an office setting that is calm and obstacle-free, and ask questions and offer assistance. So those are just a few things, but I'm really excited to talk about two organizations here in Utah that are currently helping the disabled community. So the first one is the Developmental Disability Management Services. This is something that is across the nation, but that we have specifically here in Utah. And it's basically just a group home for adults with intellectual disabilities. So it offers a trained staff that helps them with daily tasks like health services, fiscal management, behavior management, and they're also just advocates for the community to employ these people and to collaborate with their successes. The next one that I'm going to talk about is the let's see here. Sorry, the Utah Department of Health and Human Services, and it's services for people with disabilities. So again, it's just another resource that their aim is to provide support for the disabled community and help them to lead what they call self-determined lives. They offer community living, day services, and they also just connect to other community resources. So those are some 2 great things that people here can connect and reach out to if they want to help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kat. Now, as you all have been presenting, there's been a couple people in the chat sending in questions for all of you to answer. So our first question is actually for Itzel. Someone asked, what are some of the biggest challenges that people with disabilities face in everyday life?
Yes, thank you. There are lots of navigating physical facilities, finding employment, just like how Kat mentioned, a lot of people like to assume that they can't do certain things. So also just like a lack of accessibility. You know, sometimes a lot of people don't think about it. They don't think that they might struggle, or that there's other people out there struggling with like disabilities. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then for the sake of time, we're going to do one more question that got sent in, and this one's for Kat. It says, what are things I should or shouldn't do to make people with disabilities feel comfortable?
I love this question because there's just some things in our vernacular that we can do to change to help empower the disabled community. So refrain from referring to someone as their disability. So he's in a wheelchair, she's handicapped, and instead say, you know, she requires assistance or he uses a wheelchair. And also
Okay, I'm sure your answer is awesome. My Wi-Fi totally just cut out there for a second, but thank you both so much for your answers to the questions. We're going to close really quick with a quiz just to test everyone's knowledge from what we've learned today. So let's start with question number 1. What percent of the population have some type of disability? And we discussed this very beginning. So 1 in 4 American adults currently struggle with a disability. So we're going to 26%. Question number 2, which of the following are stereotypes that people with disabilities may face? They cannot care for themselves, they are helpless, they're unable to make their own decisions. Of course, unfortunately, these are all stereotypes that the disabled community has to face that we as healthcare providers should be addressing. Okay, true or false, having a disability can include activity limitations such as difficulty seeing, hearing, walking, or problem solving. And the answer to that, of course, is true. And finally, how many people with disabilities have an unmet healthcare need because of costs in the last year? If you remember from earlier in our presentation, this number is 1 in 5. So all very important things for us as healthcare providers to keep in mind when we're working with the disabled community. I want to thank again our panel for being here with us today and for all of you for joining us. Thank you. Hope you've learned some good things and take care.